All right, so maybe this Kirk Cousins thing was actually kind of real, or at least the Broncos thought it may have been real. According to a new report coming out today from Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, the Broncos and GM George Paton touched base with Mike McCartney, who is the agent of Kirk Cousins, letting him know that while the team was hamstrung cap-wise, he and Sean Payton liked Cousins a lot and definitely would be interested if the market changed a bit. She wrote this up for us at denversports.com. Kind of interesting that, hey, we're going to call the agent and tell him we like him. We just can't afford him. What, did they think Kirk was going to come to Denver to give him a discount because this roster's so talented? Or obviously a heavy dose of sarcasm there. But in all seriousness, what did you make of this news today?
I guess you got to shoot your shot, right?
It's a good way to put it.
There was no realistic chance of getting Kirk Cousins.
Zero
with the Broncos cap situation. You would have had to structure a contract that would have, put an astronomical figure into the future. And there's only so much you can do on that. I mean, there may have been some creative structuring with voidable years down the line and that sort of thing. Atlanta was able to come up with a pretty clean 4-year, $180 million deal that includes $100 million guaranteed. And they weren't going to be the only ones in the mix. It was one of those deals where you reach out and say, hey, if the situation becomes this, keep us in mind. But realistically, once the Falcons got involved, there was zero shot.
Yeah, I mean,
zero shot.
In some sense, you could say George Payton's just doing his due diligence, whatever. Yeah. In other senses, you could say George Paton doesn't really live in reality, that he even made the phone call. That he, keep us in mind.
What's the worst that can happen from making that phone call?
I don't know, but why doesn't... don't get me started on George Paton. I don't feel like it tonight. I do it all the time. I don't feel like it tonight.
He's your pincushion.
I just don't think he's very good at his job. It's nothing personal. I just think he's really, really bad at his job, actually. But he's calling about Kirk Cousins. I don't know if that makes him feel better at night because he made the worst trade in NFL history and he gave out the worst contract in NFL history and he just took on $53 million in dead cap. Maybe that makes George sleep a little better at night. Hey, I called about Kirk Cousins. I don't know. This isn't living in reality to me to call about Kirk Cousins.
If it takes you 5 minutes just in case the market had not materialized, what's the harm in calling? I mean,
you got me started when I didn't want to get started.
There are honest and fair critiques of George Paton.
There's about 30 of them.
Doing due diligence just in case the market doesn't materialize as projected, to me, that's not one of the things that it's not relevant as a critique.
Well, is he going to call Kansas City next and say, hey, if you trade that Patrick Mahomes guy, give us a call?
Well, I mean,
where's the line between realistic
Mahomes
and not
isn't
realistic?
becoming a free agent like Kirk Cousins is.
All right,
I mean, it's completely, it's apples, not even apples and oranges. It's apples and cabbage heads.
Do you wish they had gotten Kirk Cousins the first time around? Because he was the hottest name in Broncos country with John Elway when he was a free agent leaving Washington. Of course, chose Minnesota, but how different is the trajectory of this franchise? Obviously, Russell Wilson never becomes a Bronco. If they land Kirk Cousins the first time, what was that, 6 years ago at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yes, 6 years ago. I don't think the Broncos have any more Super Bowls.
I don't think they do either, but we also don't have Joe Flacco and Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Locke and Russell Wilson and Jeff Driscoll and
And that's the thing. There are some that are going to say no more Super Bowls. Oh, it's all the same. It's not the same.
No.
Okay?
Not the roller coaster we've been on the last 7 8 years.
Roller coaster implies that you go up.
Yeah, true. Not
a fair amount.
The free fall.
Yeah,
we're still on the part of the roller coaster where they launched you over the edge and we're still going down.
Yes.
We're just waiting to come back up.
Right. That hasn't happened. And with Kirk Cousins, I think it would have been a roller coaster. There would have been some downs and there would have been some ups. We would not be sitting here talking about a team that has missed the playoffs 8 consecutive seasons.
We wouldn't be talking about a team with only Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci on their roster and the largest dead cap in NFL history.
But would they have brought him back? Because you could be sitting here looking at if Kirk Cousins had become a Bronco. And perhaps it would have reached a point where you said, this has gone as far as it can. It's time to turn the page. Very much like Minnesota did. So it's possible that the last 6 years could have looked and felt much different in the fact that there would have been competitive seasons from this team. Probably, let's say, a couple of playoff years, 2 playoff seasons.
Yeah.
It would have been tougher for the Broncos operating in the AFC than it was for the Vikings in the NFC.
Sure, and Patrick Mahomes coming into the division right when Kirk Cousins got here as well.
That's correct.
What do you make of, because you're the Broncos historian, like what went wrong there? Why did Kirk Cousins pick Minnesota? Was it strictly money? Was it competitive balance? Did John Elway not make a strong enough pitch? Because usually when John Elway wanted something, especially in that time, John Elway got it, but Cousins just never panned out.
Wasn't the most attractive situation. Minnesota was coming off of a year in which it made the NFC Championship game with Case Keenum at quarterback. Minnesota could sell to Kirk Cousins the notion that they were close. Another thing that was also in play is that Minnesota gave Kirk Cousins, that first contract they gave him, every dollar was guaranteed. So you got to put that money in escrow. I think it was $88 million or something.
And this
to
was
that effect
firmly
at the time.
when the Broncos were in the trust. Pat Bowlen had long since stepped away, and the Walton Penner family ownership group wasn't coming along for another 4 years. So at the time, yeah, finances were absolutely a consideration, and $88 million is a lot of money to have to put in escrow.
3-year fully guaranteed contract.
Okay.
$84 million, my bad. $84 million. Every last dollar guaranteed.
You're right in the ballpark, and it was a different time financially for the franchise. And ironic, because I'm sort of going down memory lane here with you, you bring up the name of the Broncos who they ultimately settled for. So in a way, Kirk Cousins did have an impact on the Broncos. He went to Minnesota. They said, hey, Case Keenum took us to an NFC title game, but that's not good enough. They let him walk, and he winds up in Denver. And yes, the Paxton Lynch thing was what started all of this. I get it. But Case was the first of the Band-Aids that didn't work. Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid, the Flaccos, the Bridgewaters, and the biggest Band-Aid in Russell Wilson.
Yeah, his guarantee was $25 million, by the way. Case Keenum's was at the time that Kirk Cousins got his. Russell Wilson was not supposed to be a Band-Aid.
No.
That was the one that you figured was the actual fix. This was...
Oh, it's the Flex Seal on the gaping wound.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. And instead, I just got glue in my wound, and now it hurts. Didn't seal anything up.
Now you got to get that glue out.
Exactly.
That glue has seeped into your system. It's caused some toxic issues, and now you got to flush it out.
So Cousins...
And it's painful to flush that stuff out.
It is. Cousins goes to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Vaguely linked here. Mayfield goes back to Tampa. Vaguely linked here. Again, money probably not going to work with either of those guys. Fields goes to Pittsburgh. You've made it abundantly clear that Sean Payton had no interest in Justin Fields. I'll take your word on it.
You know what's interesting? That 6 years ago, cash was the issue. Today, the cash reservoirs are close to limitless in a football sense, but the cap is the limitation.
Yep. Life comes at you fast. And the fact that the roster just isn't very talented. So if you're Kirk Cousins and you're 36 years old, first of all, you're not giving anyone a discount, as evidenced by the money he took from Atlanta. But second of all, dude's won one playoff game in his life. He looks at Atlanta's roster and thinks they play in a somewhat mediocre division. They've got some playmakers down there. I can go win 10, 11 games, get in the tournament, give myself a chance. I go to Denver. I'm just wasting the last 3 years of my NFL career winning 6 or 7 games. It just wouldn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, take a look at the quarterbacks around the NFC as well. How many quarterbacks in that conference are appreciably better than Kirk Cousins?
Appreciably?
Yes.
Oh, man. I'd say Dak Prescott's better than Kirk Cousins. I'd say Jalen Hurts is better than Kirk Cousins. It's 2 in the East. In the North, I'm not buying Love just yet. Certainly not buying a Williams in Chicago. Goff, I can't say with a straight face he's definitely better than Kirk Cousins. I don't think anyone in the North. In the South, I'm not saying Baker. Certainly not saying Derek Carr at this point. Definitely not Bryce Young. And then in the West, not Geno. Brock Purdy's a good player, but he's still got a lot to prove and a lot of playmakers. Certainly not Kyler. And then Matthew Stafford is kind of getting up there. So to answer your question, 2 or 3?
Yeah. And I'm not even sure Purdy. I think Cousins might go to San Francisco in that offense and do better than Purdy.
He could.
Okay.
So I think really only Dak and maybe Jalen Hurts.
Same exercise in the AFC. Mahomes, Herbert,
Probably.
Burrow,
Burrow,
Allen.
Jackson, Tua, perhaps.
C.J. Stroud.
I mean, he was in MVP consideration halfway through the year last year.
So we just rattled off 6, 7 guys. Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, so the AFC has
Lamar, Burrow, Allen, Stroud, Herbert, Mahomes. Clearly, just 6 right there, clearly. And then maybe Tua.
And in the NFC, it's Dak and Hurts, and that's probably it. That's probably it. All right, a fascinating exercise. George Paton called Kirk Cousins' agent, got told thanks, but no thanks.